Welcome to the Vision Profiles podcast. Join us, two dedicated Apple Vision Pro users, as we dive into everything from the hardware and software to apps and the latest updates in the world of Apple Vision Pro. I'm Marty Gencius, a faculty member at Kent State University, a podcaster, and an avid Apple product fan.
And I'm Eric Bolden. I work in IT, but my interest is in finding interesting ways to share content. Currently, that's photography of plants and birds and panoramic sequences.
This is so weird, such a weird experience. It's almost, Eric, you look three-dimensional. Like there's a depth to you that I've never quite seen before. Why don't you explain what's going on?
This new beta is really awesome. It's almost like being there.
Yeah, well, it's actually being there. We're together at Macstock recording this, so we're doing travel mics, and we're in a room that's a little bit more echoey. So you might pick some of that up in the production aspect of it. But we'll talk more about Macstock after we cut through some news, because. So you had pointed out that Apple had expanded, of course, itself into more countries. We don't have a lot of news this week because we're recording this on a sort of a short week while we're together versus both traveling on our usual Monday night. So news is going to be short, but I don't think we've missed anything too critical. Vision Pro is now in more countries outside of the U.S., and it was released Friday?
Yeah, really recently.
Yeah, two and a half days ago. And why don't you mention Patrice and how she was in Austria, got on the train.
Well, she had a train trip, didn't she?
She did a train trip to go up to Munich, I think.
Yeah, I didn't get the whole story, but I saw a picture.
Yeah.
I saw a picture that involved
her on a train with a Vision Pro headset on. So she had gone up to pick up the Vision Pro headset, and she is a podcaster and a friend of podcasters here with us with Apple Vision Pro. So it's extended itself into other countries: Australia, Canada, France, Germany, and the UK. And it was just this last Friday that happened. People were lined up for slots with demos on the Vision Pro. And, it was still expensive. And some of the news that we hear coming out of and some of the reviews, same sort of issues that we heard in the domestic U.S. reviews. So common thread there.
And similar reactions, too. People were delighted at the demos. The experience, I think, was better than they expected. It was a good experience, I think. Very successful.
Yeah. And at the same time, we're hit with a couple of stories that say, it doesn't look like Apple's going to sell enough, and doesn't look like people want to make apps for it. So we're sort of back in that whole process and the way people think about the device. That was one big story in terms of what's going on with Apple Vision Pro. And then you sent a couple of stories that were from and in German.
Yes.
And we'll put the links in there. And Eric sent it to me, and he's like, well, they're in German. And I texted him back and I said, who doesn't know German? And I took German for 4 years in high school, and then took the test to place out of it in college, and wound up having to take 2 more years of it. I have never used it, but it does come in handy a little bit when you're looking at these articles. And of course, I won't kid folks too much that the article can do a translate on it pretty immediately. And you can find out some of the same things in terms of reactions that they're having in Germany in store.
Yeah, and it was interesting too that they described the process. That it sounds like it was a little bit easier to get into demos, which is good. And there's some descriptions about differences in the glasses inserts that people had been receiving. As far as labeling being a little bit different. I have no idea why there were apparent differences, but the inserts all seem to work just perfectly.
Yeah, one of the stories is you're referring to, I'm reading it here in German, did say that like people had gotten inserts when they looked at the inserts and used them, they were the right inserts, but for some reason in the packaging and the boxing on the outside, the numbers were wrong with it. So,
and I did notice that if you have computer distance prescriptions, the Zeiss doesn't accept those. You have to have a regular prescription that you send in. And there had been some comments, even in the U.S., that the prescriptions were slightly adjusted to move things away a tiny bit. So maybe that's what was showing up on the box.
yeah, I think it fits with the thought that, and then what I've heard is the focal length is about really 4 meters, or what have you heard about that?
Yeah, basically it starts out at a sort of equivalent to what the computer reading glass distance is and beyond.
Yeah, and so and it's because of the device and where the device's general focal length is with it. So we'll have, again, these articles posted in German for you, and articles about arrival, and then some general interest articles. Concern, and this was in Apple News, is where I got it from. But Apple News scrapes from a lot of other. This is really a Financial Times story that Apple News had scraped and put in. And it was saying that there's concerns that new apps are not coming out as fast as they should for the device.
Or more that they weren't coming out as fast as they did when it was first announced.
Yeah, so they've slowed down in the app production.
Now, oddly enough, as you move through to the end of the article, it also says, oh, hey, recently there was a developer conference where everybody was busy learning new things and could ask questions, and there hasn't yet been enough time to take that information and push out new releases. So perhaps it's not really unexpected that there are not quite as many releases from when it first came out, even though it's being newly introduced in more countries. The device has still been out for a while. I suspect that there will be new releases now that developer conferences happened and developers have had time to see some of the new features. They're still working with the new version of the operating system, the beta that is currently out for developers, and so some of it's just a time thing.
Yeah. So articles kind of clickbait you into this thing, oh, well, now it's doomed, but then they give the context for the changes, and it's not doomed, it's just a different process. It's not everything's being thrown up on the shelf at once for people to be able to have access to.
Yeah, and the very end of the article, they of course go back and say, yep, Apple's committed for the long game. They're highly invested in this. Don't worry about it. So, yeah, the title doesn't really match the conclusion of the article, but it did get us to read it.
And talk about it on our podcast. Again, these links will be in the show notes of the podcast, so you'll be able to get to these articles yourself and make up your own mind on them. A 9 to 5 Mac article talks about a confirmation that Vision OS 2 will not be available in public beta. We're here at this conference, and we'll talk more about the experience we had last night in a minute. But we had 4 or 5 other people with Vision Pro headsets, and I think all of them have put the beta on already, the 2.0. And so there is no public to be beta with. It's a small group. There's no advantage for people who are going to go beta. They're going to go beta. It's not a group of developers. Well, it's of course necessary for developers, but for folks who aren't developing, they're going to try it out anyways.
Yeah, and there's a big enough difference in the beta right now. And most of the Vision Pros out there are being used either personally or for something that's not so mission critical that you can't run the beta.
Yeah.
So the benefits of the beta for most people far outweigh any issues you might have, and wiping it might be enough. Now, I will say that after I installed the beta on my Vision Pro, Apparently, my photos rearranged in iCloud slightly behaves differently. So if you have not yet installed the beta, you may not want to install it if you are used to the way Photos is arranged until you upgrade on your other devices.
Yeah, and I have photos, but I'm not a photos guy like you are. And so, okay, let me find the picture of my dog. I mean, that's the level of need that I have when working with photos. A couple of other really, I think, cool things. I think the acuity in terms of eyesight and the reactivity in terms of eyesight, looking at objects and having them react, is much better in the beta. And then, of course, the killer, everybody said Apple doesn't have a killer app for this. Well, it does. It's that small hand gesture that allows you to go one side or the other and make decisions. And we even had somebody who had just loaded it up and hadn't used it and was trying to find the control panel. And he said, "Can I still get it by looking up?" I'm like, "I'm not sure." And then he did the hand gesture, and I said, "Okay, that's where you'll find it." And he was like, "Now what does it look like, and how do I get it to guest mode?" So there's a lot of cool things with the beta that I think is going to be neat and worth the risk of putting it on. I had to, as I said in previous shows, wipe everything off my Vision Pro to be able to load it, and then have to re-add things. And I found that last night when we were doing demos, people were saying, "Oh, I want to see the dinosaur," and I thought, that's a demo that you can get in the App Store, or Apple Store. So I never added it, but people really wanted the demo of the dinosaur. So we'll talk about that. Then finally, Tim Cook explains it all in an article that comes out of 9 to 5 Mac, and it was what he thinks Vision Pro is good for. In some of the areas he thought were daily use, entertainment, which I don't know if that was the objective, to create another entertainment device, or that entertainment was going to come through as the wow experience for people. But it certainly was some of the things that he's done.
Well, and entertainment is certainly one of the easiest things to experience. You don't have to have taken a picture before. You don't have to have done anything else. You pop it up. You get to experience a couple of variants of theater viewing, and you get to watch a really nice, very large screen TV show or movie, or you get a nice sharp 3D movie experience with good sound, and you're in the perfect seat. So in that aspect, I think it will continue to be an easy to explain primary use of the device.
Yeah, and from the article, which apparently came from an interview with Tim Cook, maybe it was the Australian interview he did. I can't figure out the source here. But because there was an Australian interview that he did where they asked quite a bit about Vision Pro, because of course it was being released there. He says about spatial computing, when you're working in multiple screens, like so many of us do, the multitasking is much more efficient on Vision Pro, because you can take various windows and put them in your space and around in your space. I didn't do that enough last night, and people were kind of reluctant to, it's like, "Oh, I accidentally opened your email." I don't care. It's basically a bunch of angry students. Answer them if you like. But there was nothing really a privacy nature that I felt threatened with these folks. It's a very close conference that people couldn't see, but I didn't think to say, now open another one, put them around the room.
Luckily, I always have a cluttered desktop, and in the Apple Vision Pro, I had, my photos was open against one wall, and I had a setting thing that was a little bit behind me, and another app behind that. So it was there was some confusion kind of getting to the right window. Luckily, when people were trying things out, like in the Apple Store, we had an iPad that could show us kind of what people were seeing. And for most things that worked well. The only real issue is if someone went into a movie or something, some sort of protected media, then all of a sudden you couldn't see what was going on.
Yeah, yeah, that was a big thing because I saw everybody else doing it. Let's do this. Let's talk about the setting. First of all, we're here at Macstock. Macstock is a conference of about 100 folks who, many of them are return attendees, like myself, like Eric, and we come every year to this pilgrimage in or around Woodstock, Illinois. We're in Crystal Lake, which is near Woodstock, and hence the name Macstock. And it's a gathering of people who are really interested in Mac, Apple platforms, and iOS, and different types of OSs and apps that can supplement people's workflow. And it's a series of presentations. Friday, we had 4 90-minute workshops that were sequential and people could attend. And then it opened up on Saturday and Sunday. We're on Sunday afternoon at this point, where we're doing 45-minute presentations on a variety of topics. I've got one coming up after we're just finished recording this show, which is about how to help people learn how to do their own troubleshooting, and the process that you can use to deal with folks who are resistant about doing their own troubleshooting and learning about computers. So it's little 45-minute tidbits like that are really helpful. And last night, Eric and I did everything possible to avoid the karaoke.
The karaoke was fun. I went afterwards.
You went afterwards. Okay. Did you sing?
No.
Okay.
That everyone appreciated the fact that I was merely clapping for other people.
Yeah. I don't find any enjoyment in watching people sing poorly.
It was good. There was a lot of enthusiasm.
Okay. Well, enthusiasm is great. Talent can be different from enthusiasm. So last night what we did was we got actually the room we're sitting in now, recording the show, and said, anybody who's got a Vision Pro, we said this before the conference, before the people arrived, bring them. We're going to just have a meetup, and we thought we would be recording this show during the time. Because we thought maybe 3, 4, 5 people, somebody would come in for a little bit, leave, come back in. How many people do you think showed up?
I don't know. It was really busy. There were a lot of Vision Pros. There were tons of people. There were people watching people and people participating and people, immersed in their own worlds.
Yeah, and people kind of watching people do their experience because we started mirroring it on devices that we brought with us. And then it's like, okay, who wants to go next? Well, the person who just watched it then said, I want to try that. And, as Eric alluded to before, one of the problems that we had was mirroring and showing video with NDR on it in terms of protections. And so if you're mirroring and you're trying to talk somebody into the Apple Plus or the TV Plus to be able to look at a video that you've downloaded already, it doesn't work for them and it doesn't work for you. You get a black screen. I think they get the audio from what I heard, but there's a lot of noise in the room. And so what I started doing was shutting off the mirroring and then booting it back up and giving it to the person and said, okay, let me take you into a downloaded movie. I chose Gravity, and I really have never seen that whole film, but it's such an impressive 3D experience. Yes. And then put them in the cinema where the whole, you're sitting in that black.
Really nice.
And, the thing that happened for me because you're struggling, I'm sweating, I'm trying to help them get it set up. The guest setup is not working for them. They have to use my password, which means they've already had a problem. But you get them into the video, and that's the first time you hear them go, oh, wow. I had a couple of those oh, wow experiences. One was with the video when we finally got it rolling. And then the other, I got a few folks to go into spatial photos and take a couple of my photos and put them in spatial. And there was not an oh, wow, there was a my God. So I don't know. What was your experience with folks? Because you were sitting at another end of the table doing the demos.
Yeah, and in my case, I was having network problems, and which meant that there was media that I kept trying to get, and it was not making it. So we went and looked at some pictures. We did some panoramic and images, and that was an oh wow experience, I think, for several people. But even just putting the Apple Vision Pro on, there was a kind of an oh wow experience, especially for people who had tried other headsets, because it was like, I can see the room. I can see everything plus, and that was different from what they were experiencing, and different, I think, from what they were even expecting. And then, when you brought up a picture, a panorama, and then click the button to have the panorama wrap itself around you, and, then kind of like stand up and look to your left and right and see everything, or for a scenic overlook, looking out over the scenic overlook and the little descriptive plaque, and then yet being able to look kind of behind you on both sides. That was definitely an oh wow.
Yeah, I put somebody in Night Sky, or I forget what the app is, where the whole room becomes a black sky with constellations, and I think it was Cletus, and I said, okay, now look at a constellation, see it comes up, there's Ursa Major, now reach up and grab it and pull it down, and he was like, oh wow. We had a lot of fun with that last night, doing that setup.
And Cletus walked around the table and tried the demo. The next demo.
Yeah, he was.
So he got a couple chances, but I had a different
process,
different Sky app.
Oh, okay.
Star app.
Yeah.
And that app has the ability to select from various colored lasers, which you can then aim into the sky and get little sparkly bursts as you draw the laser around in the sky, which was also that's just cool moment.
Yeah, Cletus was the guy who showed up at the party and went to the buffet 2 or 3 times because he worked his way around the table. Great guy. He's been wanting to get one of these for a while.
He kept checking his watch and saying, the Apple Store, it's closed.
Thanks, guys, for spending my money.
So hopefully we'll hear from him soon.
Yeah. And we said
his experience with his new device.
We'll put him on the show. I told him, well, you get it, we'll put you on the show, and we'll have you as part of the conversation. Anything else you want to share about it?
I guess the other thing that kind of came up both from the news articles out of Europe and from some of the other conversations is, a lot of people had gone to the Apple Store and had the Apple Store demo. And they certainly have read articles. Some people hadn't read anything and they just were coming in cold. But it's a device that has enough of a cost to it. People really want to see it a couple of times, see examples of how people are using it a couple of times. And so to me, the whole room, that whole evening, felt a lot like how the old Mac users groups used to feel, where there was a new computer or a new device or a new printer or a new projector, and people weren't really sure, do we want it, do we not, but they came, they got to see it used, they could touch it, they could kind of play with it, and maybe it would take 2 or 3 demos before they took the plunge. And I think that we'll see that with the Apple Vision Pro over time, that people don't necessarily walk in and then walk out with it. It might take 2 or 3 interactions or 4 interactions, and then it's like, I can't take it anymore, I need my own.
Yeah. There were a couple personal victories for me, well, at least one in particular, where we have a colleague who unfortunately had trouble and lost one of his eyes because of a disease state. And he was reluctant to think that this would ever work for him. And so to see him come into the room, sit down, and put the headset on, and I checked with him afterwards because he was at the other end of the table. I said, how did it go? And he goes, I'm really surprised it worked. And I said, well, what surprises you about it? And he said that it worked. And how does it know that I don't have a right eye? And I said, because it's looking at your iris and making that determination. And then it's adjusting for that determination. He's like, oh. So that was kind of special to have that happen. And I appreciate him being part of it. I had talked about doing a presentation on this, and the presentation was not something that the people who coordinated was excited about it because they saw it as a niche product. But they came into the room, they saw what was going on, they came back into the room to remind us that we have to shut down by 10:30 because people were still doing their thing. And, Mike Potter, who coordinates this whole conference, kind of said, this is exactly what this is well suited for. And so I think it helped him think about breakouts and ways that we can do this kind of community in that way. I'll share with you, do you have anything else to share, or we'll cut out and I've got 15 minutes before I have to do my presentation, and you've got lunch sitting across the table. So it's Macstock Conference and Expo.com. I will put the link in the show notes, so for folks who just want to see what this experience was like. And we have people across the country. We have international people who come to this and have come to it regularly. So don't be shy if you want to come back or try it next year. It'll be there for you, and you'll get to meet Eric and myself here, which is probably not the biggest draw in the world, but at least you have two friends here. So thanks for listening. We will see you next time. It's been great. We'd love to hear from you. If you have ideas or want to join an episode, email us at visionprofilespodcast@gmail.com. Our bumper music is Free Jazzy by Steve Combs, courtesy of the Free Music Archive. Learn more about us and Vision Profiles Podcast on our website, VisionProFiles.info. And all of our available podcasts are at thepodtalk.net. Spread the word to other visionaries. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.